My name is Yuuka, Taurke, and it's just so great to see you. Here you are. To me, you're in your boxes, but for you, you're in your environment. So I just want to welcome your environments too. So we'll sit together with all of our homes and all of our spaces. Okay, so my last two Dharma talks featured a lot of drama and ALS diagnosis, which hopefully is not true, a dire hospitalization. And it was really impossible not to turn toward these emergencies, not to give them attention. But today I want to talk about the things that we may not notice, the things that might escape our attention, and how we can actually feel better if we become sensitive toward them. I want to talk about healing my body and healing our racism, and how hope might help. So last week, the ban on plastic bags finally went into effect. It might have a greater impact on our planet than the last abusive tweet that we might have read. Last I looked, there were only 4 comments on that article. Yesterday, I went for a walk and I was not assaulted. That was also true the day before and true for thousands of walks I've taken. But I didn't make a note of it until I was composing this talk. Yesterday, I had enough food to eat. I didn't get arrested, didn't get hospitalized. So, especially since November of 2016, we're hit daily, constantly, really by horrifying headlines, and we keep clicking, doom scrolling, as some have called it. And I think we've seen it as almost our duty to react, to be outraged. So Steven Pinker, who is a cognitive psychologist, drew a lot of fire when he suggested that actually a lot of things are getting better, that we don't notice incremental change because our attention is unceasingly drawn to the emergencies and generally terrible things. And because history is written by the victors, or you could say the privileged caste, many of us don't realize how bad things were for those who were violently oppressed. He was interpreted as a racism denier, which was a good headline. It was controversial and blaming, as if he were proposing that we don't work on racism because we no longer have sanctioned lynchings. But actually, research on motivation tells us that most of us can only take in so much alarming data without entering ineffective states like despair, chronic anxiety, or rage. So it's possible that realizing that we've made some progress can actually help us make more. Yeah, of course, it can also be a defense. Is everyone able to hear me okay, despite my voice? Good. So when George Floyd was murdered, there was rage and protest, and there was backlash, and there were promises, and then there were obstacles, and then there was disappointment when the promises weren't kept. Because our racism is complicated. It's sometimes hard to see. Sometimes it's hard to prove. If it were a simple matter of removing of the good people and the bad people, we could just punish or restrict the bad people, and that would be that. But actually, it's more subtle and coordinated, like the workings of the body. So, you know, when I entered the hospital in the spring, my CO2 was 3 times normal. When I got out, it was 2 times normal. And I weighed 87 pounds, a number that I have not seen since I was 11. You know, and you would think that it would be simple to breathe, to eat, to build muscle. But because I have some kind of neurological disorder of communication between the neurons and the muscles, I have to study the situation very carefully. And, you know, maybe I'll just say, so there's no mystery about this. I'm being treated for myasthenia gravis. My diaphragm, my respiratory muscles are about 60% of normal right now. I'm getting another test next week. Hopefully the treatment for myasthenia improves it. But here I am working with my body as it is. And if I push too hard, if I try too hard, my muscles will spasm. I can't swallow or talk if the back of my tongue is in spasm, or my abdomen. And this spasm or the cramp when it comes is very obvious. But the question is, can I sense what comes before it and encourage it to stop? And you know, that's where Zen comes in. And not just Zen, but also other methods that encourage sensation. Feldenkrais, yoga, Alexander, some approaches to dance. And recently I've discovered a neural retraining program created by Joaquin Farias, who is a doctor in biomechanics. Feldenkrais is famous for the instruction to make less effort, to untie habit from movement so that we can allow innovation. Because the habits are what got us into this pickle. And if we keep making effort in the same way, the same stuff is going to happen. So I'm going to talk about Dr. Farias's steps toward healing. But first, a little koan. So as I was preparing for the talk, I was hunting for something that would speak to the paradox of effort. And I was asking Roshi, like, where's the one? There's one about turning toward and how that takes you away. And I was searching on the phrase and I couldn't think, like, there's nothing about turning away. And then I finally realized it's one of our classic koans, fundamental, ordinary mind. Joshu asked Nansen, what is Tao, or what is the way? Nansen answered, ordinary mind is the way. Joshu asked, so then do we direct ourselves toward it or not? Nansen said, if you direct yourself toward it, you go away from it. You know, and then Nansen goes on to challenge both knowing and not knowing. And he asks, how can there be right or wrong in the Tao? So is there really no right or wrong? Do we just give up directing ourselves? No, yes and no. And Master Dogen sets up a very similar paradox about attaining the way in his Fukan Zazen Ki, the basic instructions for meditation. He says, why should we waste our efforts trying to attain it? Then a couple sentences later, he says, yet if there is the slightest deviation, you will be as far from the way as heaven is from earth. I have always been fascinated by that line because it's so dramatic. It makes me want to make great effort, but how? Don't go toward it or away from it. but also don't deviate from it? Exactly. Also, let's look at Dr. Farias's plan for neural retraining. Step 1, awareness. Step 1, awareness. Identify the neuronal pathways, the muscles, and the compensations. So, to breathe, I need to open my ribs, allow my belly to drop. As soon as I have the thought it's not working, I can't do it, the big abdominal muscles start to contract, and there's no room for the diaphragm to expand. That's the compensation. Step 2, connection. Say no to the compensation. Reconnect the neurons, bypassing the compensation. Maybe I can take a breath without trying to take a breath. I just did. Step 3, modulation. Strengthen connection, function, endurance, initiation, and inhibition. So during Winter Anga last year, I figured out what to relax in order to swallow. It was very subtle, and it was only possible because we ate together in silence with great attention. But by the time I got home, my body had forgotten. We need to keep practicing, strengthening the new way, clarify the intention, make it last, note the obstacles, the triggers, and work with them. Farias is obsessed with how compensation sets up feedback loops that make things worse. The contraction of those big muscles means I can't feel the diaphragm. And Feldenkrais talks about how strain or pain drowns out the subtle signals. So there's this paradox of using effort to stop effort. Don't compensate, take the consequences. And that's why sometimes we can feel worse after practice until we can innovate. And I'd like to propose that we can apply this to our traumatized body of racism. If I can learn to sense what happens before a spasm, maybe we can learn to sense what happens before racist action. Okay, so I'm going to focus on white work on racism. We have a lot of work to do together, but this is just where I'm at. So step 1, awareness. What exactly is the internal process that leads to racist practices? It isn't just the economy in 1619, it's now. Can we sense tribalism, desire to belong, love, a desire to cast people out, rank each other? What are the compensations or the defenses? So many of us who are white may not have noticed the very smooth way that white supremacy culture protects us. Like how we don't much worry about what will happen if we're pulled over by the police while driving white. Mr. Biden has now called that out on national TV. We're in the midst of this reckoning, and we might be in a turmoil of cognitive dissonance. So what does that feel like? We start by sensing our bodies in space. What do you feel right now? Sochen last week offered us a wonderful experience. in his Dharma talk, an introduction to our text, Being Time, he invited us to notice how our body is keeping time, the clock of our heartbeat, our breath. Can you feel your heartbeat? The blinking of your eyes. What do you notice about your rhythm? What do you hear? What do you see? What if you move your eyes and your head to the right? What's in your center now? And what's in your periphery? What if you move your head to the right, but you keep your eyes to the... So, well, I felt a little jump there myself. How about you? Can you feel in your body where there's tension? Can you feel where there isn't? I notice that my left toe feels just fine. How about your nervous system? Are you ready to fight or are you resting? If you were going to move right now, what would you do? What thoughts would come with that? What came first, the thought or the movement impulse? Okay, step 2, stop the compensation, dismantle the defenses. So we stop trying to be a good white person, maybe, acting out of guilt. I think really all self-improvement is doomed because the self, it secretly doesn't really want to change. You know, of course, from the Zen perspective, there's nothing to change because there is no self. But how does that work toward healing racism? I think if we all understand that we're steeped in racist ideas and practices, we can give up blame and just start studying the situation. Step 3, modulate, reconnect, strengthen. This is practice, practice, more practice, so that we can remain connected throughout our life. So maybe in the white work on racism group, we can drop the defenses. But can we also do it during a family gathering, cocktail party? What if there is a Trumpian coup? Is the same thing required there or something different? Isabelle Wilkerson, in her book on caste, tells an astounding story of suspending compensations so that she could connect with a dismissive plumber wearing a MAGA hat. She must have practiced a lot. What about hope? Our former president wrote about the audacity of hope. Chogyam Trungpa famously pushed the slogan, "Abandon all hope of fruition," which I always found very freeing. Rebecca Solnit suggests that true hope comes from the ability to tolerate uncertainty, the true nature of things. I would like to say that hope can help us improve if we don't get stuck insisting on the outcome that we hope for. So am I getting better or am I getting worse? I don't know, maybe both. But hope helps me lean toward possibility instead of doom. And I would like to bring back Obama's slogan, "Yes, I can." Yes, we can. Maybe yes, we will, but certainly yes, we can, if we can imagine it. As soon as we imagine it, something changes. So is racism changing? It's changing. Are we getting better? I think that's up to us. So here is, to close, a poem from one of our Zen ancestors, Leonard Cohen. This is the last two stanzas of one of his last poems called The Goal. The Goal. Thought I might play it for you. I'm going to just tell you the last two stanzas in this voice. I move with the leaves. I shine with the chrome. I'm almost alive. I'm almost at home. No one to follow and nothing to teach, except that the goal falls short of the reach. Thank you.